She was coughing up more of the black goo and blood. Max Weber went into the kitchen and he noticed some of the children in the masks were standing in corners or over in the dining room, and they backed away from him. So he ignored them for now. He grabbed some of the dish towels or anything he could find that might absorb the blood and went back into the hallway and tried to roll the stepmother over, but she resisted. And one of the hands reached out and tried to push him away, and the hand is very long, very much like extremely exaggerated Marfan syndrome, with the fingers are very long and bony and not quite really in proportion to everything else, and she reaches out with his big old hand and sort of pushes at his face to get him to stop. So he just kind of tries to shove the towels underneath her, and finally she seems to realize what he's doing and rolls over, and he starts pushing the towels on and trying to lay them on, and he doesn't really know what to do. She's an alien, and he doesn't even know if it's a her. He just thinks of her that way. And he's trying to help out, and he doesn't even know why he's trying to help out. I mean, normally when you shoot an alien, the plan is to run away. Back when he was in the storm shelter, someone got shot, and that was part of the problem, that he had to leave, and he ended up taking the gun, but he didn't like that. He never did like that. He was the one this time who caused it, and he could only imagine what the pain was. And just the begging for him not to hurt her. Suddenly she brings up her two arms as he's trying to tend to the wound, and she's not doing very good, but she reaches up her two arms and those long fingers, and she places them on both sides of his head and kind of pulls him lightly but somewhat forcefully towards her, and he tries to resist, but she's firm, and he has to stare into those dark but bright blue eyes. And with a thin, lipless mouth, she starts to babble. Straight into his face, and he can smell her breath. It smells like wet leaves and tree bark. And he's kind of trying to pull away a bit, but she won't let go. She keeps jabbering, and then she starts to say, "I just wanted to be a good parent. A good parent. She wanted to see you. She wanted so bad. We're not somebody to be here, not here. I just wanted to be a good mother. I've never had, never. Now I did. She's so wonderful. I couldn't say She starts to relax her grip, and he lets her lie down, and he's looking over at the towel. He's trying to stop the bleeding, and he lifts one of them up to see what's going on, and it doesn't seem to be working very well. He doesn't know anything about gunshot wounds, and then he notices that several of the kids are at the end of the hallway and are staring back at him with their masks, and he calls over to them. He says, "Listen, I have no idea how to help her out. Do you know how to help her out? Do you have medicine? Do you have, like, special alien medicine, or anything like that? Do you understand me? Because she can speak pretty good English, so you ought to be able to speak English. Your kids." And they just sort of stare back, and then one of them sort of puts his hand up and beckons from the kitchen and the dining room, and all the kids kind of start coming out from corners and such, and all wearing their creepy masks. Some of them are now carrying, just a few of them are now carrying what look like hot glue guns with big old fat hospital syringes strapped into them, and a few of them have what look like thermoses. He can hear the bumping as one of them apparently brings a red wagon through the back sliding glass door, and it's filled with all these bottled beakers and some stuffed animals, but mostly what look like chemicals and various forms of needles. And he notices that there's a few guns and stuff, and it's just all the supplies in this little red wagon. He brings it over, and Max Weber stands up as the two kids with syringes approach, a boy and a girl. One of them just sticks the syringe slowly, meticulously into the base of her jaw. The other one takes one and lifts up the blankets and sticks it right into the wound, and the tall lady starts quivering and starts babbling louder. Yes, and they start pumping the fluid that was in the syringe, this sort of greenish fluid. The one that pumps it into the wound undoes the syringe and then takes a thermos from one of the other kids and pours in this more of the green fluid into the syringe and then redoes it. And Max Weber is standing back just kind of watching this. The kids actually start to surround the tall lady and all at once kind of lift her up like a bunch of ants and kind of carry her over into the living room, half dragging her, and the blood is totally stained the carpet, and there's still sort of a trail. And they bring her into the living room. They seem to be treating her in various ways and trying to see what they can do. And then they start kind of muttering to each other, and they're not muttering in any different language. They're still muttering in English, and he can hear them saying, "We'll need to get her back to the ship. We need to get her back to the tower. Yeah, we won't be able to fix this." And then he hears, "We should have just killed him. That was my idea. We should have just killed him. He's rabid. He's like a rabid dog, a rabid raccoon, gone nuts." And one of them says, "He's not. He hasn't gone nuts. He hasn't gone nuts. He's just scared. All the humans are scared." You say. One of them says, "It's okay, we can get her back onto the ship, she'll be fine. This is what we thought might happen. This is..." And they're muttering to each other, and Max Weber, as soon as he starts hearing that they're talking about killing, presumably him, his hand's on his shotgun, and suddenly he notices that all the kids sort of turn and look over at him, and are just sort of staring through the masks. And the masks, I hadn't described them before, but they're sort of they're white. They're like totally white, and he thinks it's almost like a plastic kind of thing, but they're firm and steady, almost like ceramic or something. And then just have basic marker eyes kind of outlining where the eye holes are and making them look really dark and pitted, and then these little small black mouths drawn on them. And then some of them have added in like sketches of hair, and some of them put on like rosy cheeks with red markers, and some of them have doodled, and one of them's put like this little Harry Potter scar over one of the eyes. And that's when he notices that the one kid with the lightning scar came out of the kitchen, and he looks a little bit older than the others. He's maybe 11, and he's got the butcher knife. And Max Weber steps back, and his hand is on his shotgun, and he knows he has one more shot left in there, because it's a double barrel, and he fired one at the tall alien. He's standing there with the butcher knife, and he says, I'm just saying that he deserves it." And then one of the girls steps forward and says, "Toby, put that thing away. Come on, put it away." He says, "No, I'm not going to put it away." She says, "But she had him unwrap her face. Don't you all realize that?" And they all kind of turn to look at her, and they're like, "How do you know that? Did you see her?" And she says, "Yeah, I saw her. I saw it happen. Isn't that what happened, Mom? Isn't that what happened?" And she turns to the tall lady, who seems to be doing a bit better. She's not quivering anymore. And very slowly she raises up one of her long arms, and then all the kids are just sort of staring at her. It's almost like that's a way to get their attention. And slowly she starts saying, "Don't hurt him. We scared him as much as humans have scared us before." And Max Weber just sort of shouts out over this, "Okay, you're all going to tell me exactly what is going on now. You're going to tell me why you've been messing around with me like this, and what exactly you're trying to do, and why you're talking about killing me." And one of the kids steps forward, takes off his mask. It's its mask has larger black eye pits, and he slowly removes it. And he has no eyes. He has empty sockets that look like the eye was removed and the sockets were washed and cleaned and treated so that they would just remain empty, and it wouldn't be a sanitation problem somehow. Once he removes it, he sort of feels his way around a bit, almost like he could only see with the mask on, and then he brandishes it out. He comes really close up to Max and he holds it out, and he says, "If you put this on, it'll explain everything." And Max immediately says, "I'm not putting that thing on. You all can speak English. I don't know how the heck she can speak English, but you all definitely can speak English. You're just going to tell me I'm not putting that thing on." And he's shaking. His voice is trembling a lot more because he's talking to a kid who has no eyes, and he has no idea how that happened. And he's wondering, do all the other kids have eyes? What the heck? And the kid just kind of brandishes the mask and says, you have to put a mask on. And then the kid with the Harry Potter scar turns back into the kitchen and just throws the knife over at the counter, and it smashes into things. And then he turns back and he says, "Toby, don't give him the mask. Give him a different mask, not your mask." And Toby's saying, "I was just trying to be nice." One of the other kids steps forward and pulls out from behind her back a mask, and he recognizes it as one of the masks that was on the bed earlier. That the kid must have grabbed it or something, and she holds it out and says, "Here, you can use this one. It's new, so it'll take a while to quite warm up, but it will explain everything." And Max is standing there and he's like, "I think I already made it clear that I'm not wearing any masks." And then suddenly one of the older girls steps forward. Suddenly he realizes that he recognizes the sundress that she's wearing and the ponytail, and his heart starts pounding, and his palms are sweating against the gun as slowly she removes her own mask, and she does have eyes, and her face is normal because it's his sister again. And she kind of looks over at him and says, "Brother, you need to put on a mask." And he points the gun straight at her and he says, I'm getting out of here. You take care of her, or whatever you're going to do, but you're not going to follow me. I already told you that once. Do not follow me." And his sister says, "You can't stay here. We came back for you, to warn you." He says, "Warn me of what?" And she says, "There's Reds coming. The Reds have overrun one of the towers north of here, and they're moving south. We weren't supposed to come back to tell you. We were supposed to evacuate yesterday, but we came back so that we could tell you, but we didn't know how." He says, "Well, you got that right. I don't suppose knocking on the door and not telling me any reason why I should think you're my sister, and knocking on the walls and carving into them. What the heck do you think you're doing?" She just kind of looks down at the ground, and she's looking rather distraught, and she looks around and she looks back at the tall lady, and the tall lady's eyes are closed, but she's still breathing, and she kind of looks around and she's like, I don't know what to say. I don't understand. All I know is I just want you to come with us. You're my brother, right? You are my brother." He says, "Of course I'm your brother, assuming you're actually my sister. When you have to ask that, it makes me wonder." And he notices that there's some tears coming from her face. And all the other kids seem to be getting a little bit restless. They start swaying and kind of stepping on one foot and then the other. And there's about 15 of them in all, kind of gathered in the living room and in the edges and stuff. And Max Weber takes another step back because he's through with this. But Toby puts his mask back on, and the other girl drops the extra mask on the floor in front of him. and steps back, and his sister is just standing there with her mask off, and she says, "We, I am, and I'm also not your sister. I can't, I don't remember everything because they rescued us, and we looked into the Enkai. I'm filled with new knowledge now, and I don't understand things that I think I must have understood before, and I just remembered that normally to be polite you knock on doors, and we wanted to be polite because we didn't want you to shoot us, but time was running out, and we shouldn't have been here. Didn't like me being sad and wanted me to have my brother, and I just remembered when I saw you and you were approached. I remembered you, and I remembered you were my brother, and that's important, and I wanted to come back." And the tall lady raises up her hand, and she says a few things in her own language, sort of deliriously. "Your name's Max?" "Yeah, my name's Max." "Take care of the kids." The kids kind of start to gather around her, and Max says, "Now hold on here. Okay, you said that you could get her up to the tower. You've got medical stuff up in the tower, right? In those floating towers?" And one of the kids nods, and his sister nods, and says, yeah, we can help her out. We need to get her up there soon." He looks over the kids and he notices that tall lady's face is starting to turn red. And he's like, what's going on? And he says, "We need to get her up to the tower soon before she starts turning, she's getting infected." And he says, "What are you talking about? What, are you saying that the Reds are the same as the Gray people?" And she's saying, "No, they're well, sort of. It's complicated. It'll make a lot more sense if you put on the mask." "Why? So that I can become a husk of a person like you? Filled with who knows what?" And she says, "I really hope that you weren't this mean to me when I remembered everything." And he just feels tired. And he drops the gun, and he looks over at the kid with the lightning scar over one of the eyes, and he kicks the gun over towards him. And he says, "There's one more shot in there." And then he just sort of sits down on the floor, cross-legged, and kind of just puts his head in his hands, and is massaging his forehead, and is just kind of collapsing. He looks up, and the lightning kid hasn't moved. He's just sort of standing there, and all the other kids are kind of looking over at him. And they say, "We came here when we knew that you were here. We came here for you. It'd be a waste of time if you didn't come." And he said, "I'm not coming." They all just kind of look at him, and they start gathering around the tall lady to pick her up. And he looks over at his sister, who has put her mask back on, and he says to her, "So are you or are you not my sister?" She says, "I told you I'm both. I am your sister, but when they rescued us to make us their children, we looked into the Enkai, and the main Enkai, and then we also wore the masks to remind us of what it taught us. And we were filled with knowledge and things pertaining to the tall people, so I am her, but I don't remember a lot of things in the same way. What do you have to remember back here? What do you have to remember in this dead world? You've put on the mask, it's not like you're losing anything." And he asks, "What about Mom and Dad? I didn't find their bodies, they're still alive, right?" And she kind of looks at him and is like, "Mom's over there." And she points at the tall person. She says, I don't have a dad yet." And he stands up, and he just smacks the one mask that was put on the floor. He just kicks it as hard as he can and just shouts out, "That's not your mom!" And he heads towards the front door. It's a gunshot. And he runs up the stairs and he grabs his sister, runs over to the tall lady and ducks down and looks out the front window and then looks over out the back, and he sees red figures coming out from the trees in his backyard, and he sees they've all got weapons of some sort, and one of them is firing in the air. And he ducks down with the kids and he says, "I thought you said that we had several hours." And his sister says that I don't know. They must have gotten here earlier, a scout team, or it's a different team or something. And he's got a shotgun and he goes over to the wagon and he grabs the 2 guns out of there, goes over to the tall lady and he says, "Okay, you're able to carry her? Do you think you can go faster than them?" And he's sort of talking fast and a little bit deliriously, and he's not really sure what he's saying because he's just trying to figure out something that they can do. And he turns over towards the backyard and he sees that they're getting way closer, and then one of them points sort of a weird rifle-looking thing straight at the window. The back door shatters into pieces, and something smacks into the kid with a lightning bolt, and he sees some blood fly, and the kid collapses on the ground and screams, and he grabs the kid and drags him and tries to drag them over towards the staircase and gets them behind the wall, and a bunch of them are able to pick up the tall lady and are trying to drag her over, but then and one of the kids collapses, and Max just screams, and he jumps out from behind the wall and he fires the 2 pistols that he's got in his hands, and they smack into the head and chest. It roars, but it smacks back into the railing of the back porches. 2 others leap over it onto the back porch and are trying to get through the open back door. Max is trying to figure out what to do. They're behind this one wall behind the kitchen. And the Reds are coming towards him, and he knows they know where they are, and they're coming in, and one of them fires its gun into the air, and it blasts into the ceiling, and stuff kind of starts coming down out of the attic, and Max is just sitting there, and then suddenly the tall lady raises herself up and gets back up onto her feet, and she's standing up. She has to bend her head down low so it doesn't bonk into the ceiling, and he notices now that her face is getting very red now, and she takes some of the excess cloth from her and kind of tries to wrap it around her mouth and over her head, but you can see that the pale complexion is starting to get sort of wrinkled and reddish and starting to look like the red aliens. But she gets up and turns around, and just as one of the Reds rounds the corner, she reaches out with her long arm and she grabs it by the face, and she literally in one yank pulls the whole thing up, and she just snaps its neck and sort of shoves it aside, and it rolls down the staircase, and then the other one appears, and in several long bounds with her long legs, she just bounds over to it, and with one leg just snaps it up and kicks the Red up the side of the face, and it smacks into the other wall and leaves the splatter of goo against it as it kind of just collapses unconscious. And then she doubles over and she falls down onto her knees and is sort of wheezing, and her skin is getting more and more wrinkled. The kids are shouting and screaming, and Max sees that the Reds aren't coming through the back door, but they're redirecting their efforts, knowing that the other ones got killed inside. And so he has his guns and is trying to figure out what to do, and then he remembers that out front there's a walker. And he thinks, could I pilot that thing? He turns over to the one he knows is his sister, or sort of his sister, and he says, how far is a helicopter pod or whatever to get up to the tower? And she says, it's not far, but it's way down the street. We didn't want to land too near the house and scare you. He says, okay, I'm going to draw their fire, and you're going to carry your mother, stepmother, whatever, over to the pod and get her up there and tell your tall uncles and aunts and whoever the heck that I'm sorry I shot her and, died trying to save her. You got that? Great. And he smacks her on the back, and she just screams, What? No! No! And he says, "You don't even remember who I am. You're not going to get too choked up about it." And she says, "But I do!" But he's already running down the staircase, smacks open the front door, and he runs out, and he sees one of the Reds coming over the side yard, and he fires both of the guns, and he notices that one of the bullets seems to wing it in the arm, but he's not a good shot, especially when running, and he just tosses the guns down and just runs, and he's booking it across the yard, and this Red is down on all fours, and it's running, and it leaps over the Corolla and jumps on top of it, and then leaps over, and Max is on the driveway, and he's just booking it down towards the walker, breathing heavy. The Red is right behind him, and he can almost feel it nipping at his heels like a dog, and he's just flying, and he's just thinking, maybe how am I going to be able to get inside with this thing on my tail? And he's running over, and he runs over to the walker, and he leaps up onto one of his legs and is trying to climb, but then something snaps down on his leg, and he's never been bitten before, so this is a new sensation for him. But at first he doesn't even feel anything; it just feels sort of like force, and then he feels stinging like knives just surging up his calf, and he looks down and he sees that this ferocious Red has just sunk its crooked teeth. These Reds, they're just horrendously ugly. I mean, they look mutated, and it's got boils, and it's messed up and all wrinkled, and it just looks like this demon or devil or something, and it's just sunk its teeth into his leg. He's grabbed onto the leg of this walker, and he's trying to shake it off. He's still got on his back, sort of strapped onto his back, the shotgun, and he remembers it. That he had almost forgotten it was there as he was running. He didn't even think to drop it because he didn't have time, and he still got it there, and he managed to reach over to the trigger, and the safety's off, and he fires just sort of blindly. It just blows off the side of its head, and it collapses, but he feels that it also grazed his foot, and his leg is just a bloody mess, and he's just clinging to this walker, and he sees the other Reds. There's maybe only like 4 or 5 of them, and he climbs up the walker. It doesn't actually have a cockpit. I didn't describe it before. What it's got is it's almost got like this sort of circular mouth thing, almost like a manta ray or something, that sort of opens and closes, and he knows this because that's how the one Red had kind of fallen out of it. It looked almost like the Red just kind of got vomited out of it. He gets up to the whole thing, and he kind of sticks his arm in there and tries to figure out if he can get the thing to open, and it seems almost like that as he reaches his arm, and he sort of finds some stuff that still feels somewhat moist and dried, but dried out at the same time, but it seems to respond organically to him touching it, and the mouth sort of dilates open and widens up, and so he kind of tries to climb into it, and he feels like he's climbing into almost like the stomach of a bug or something, but it's not, it's not really slimy. Parts of it feel sort of organic, but they feel dried out, like a dried out tongue or a dried mouth. And he climbs in, and he finds that he's able to fit himself sort of in there, but it feels big for him, and he rests his arms up against these sort of braces, and there's sort of like this weird brace chair thing that he can kind of stick himself into, and it's weird because it's just not proportioned to him, so he feels sort of cramped, but also like it's too big for him at the same time, but he sort of sticks himself in, and then he feels the braces sort of tighten and sort of close in weird ways, and he doesn't feel anything stick into him, and strapped into this thing, and then the mouth slowly closes back up, and then there's silence for a moment, and then suddenly the place where the mouth had closed up suddenly seems to light up like it's a screen, and he looks out, and he sees this sort of fisheye view of the world, 180 degrees sphere, or even a little bit more than that, like a compound eye that's really sharp. That's opened up, and he can see circles and things on it that move where he moves his eyes, and seem to, and then several of them circle around the approaching Reds. He feels the walker, or maybe not the actual walker, but like the organic part of it, the sort of organic, wormy sort of inside parts of it seem to sense that there's somebody there who's not sick and dying, and he can tell that it feels his health, and it's starting to rev up the machinery parts of the walker. and this blue light kind of starts to fill up the interior of the belly of this thing, and almost makes it hard for him to see, but he starts to get used to it, and he's looking out, and then he realizes that there's things that he's seeing that weren't there before. And what he's seeing is there's these little tiny black dots that are sort of moving. Really, what it looks like is, it looks like the world is just infested with these little tiny black ants. And they're just everywhere, and they're in some places more than others, and some of them are like in the air just kind of floating, and they're not ants, they're just like these little specks, almost like they represent something, but they're just kind of floating, and some of them are on things and kind of roving around, and he notices that they're just all over the Reds. I mean, they look like these great big hulking masses of black things all over the Reds. Suddenly one of the Reds starts firing its gun at him and smacks into the side of the walker, and he can feel things breaking, feels some of the force against his temple, and then he just moving his arms, and just intuitively he feels the walker lift up, and it's almost kind of terrifying, this whole thing just sort of moving, and then suddenly coming down with this great big bang as he moves the one leg, and then he clenches his hands into fists at this thing, and suddenly he sees the blue light almost like solidify into liquid, and shoots directly out of the fish eye. It just kind of waves over it like a ripple effect, and just shoots out, and smacks into the ground where the red is, and it just explodes, and the red goes flying into the car. This is odd. It's hard for us to imagine because we weren't there for the invasion, but this is way more powerful than anything he's seen these things do before. Normally they just fire kind of like these laser bullets, and they don't actually move things. They just kind of plow you down like machine guns, but this is, that's like a missile or something, and he sees the other Reds coming up, and he clenches his fists again, and this starts repeatedly happening, and these big old light bullet things sort of shoot out from this machine. He just sort of open fires, and two of them kind of turn tail, and then he realizes that there's a whole horde of these Reds kind of moving in a more organized regiment out over in the distance. Just as he notices the kids coming out of the front door, they're carrying Tall Lady, and he sees the Reds behind the house, and a few of the kids are jumping up and down excitedly, but he knows that the Reds are still coming, so he starts moving the walker somewhat clumsily, and he runs forward. He almost trips over the car, and they're all kind of shouting like, what are you doing? You can come with us, you can come with us. But he figures that they'll figure it out eventually, and he runs past the house in this thing, and he sees the horde coming, and he starts opening fire, and they open fire on him, and he's just blowing them to shreds. Every single bullet is like a missile, and they realize this quickly and immediately scatter, and the air is just full of bullets, and he's getting pelted left and right, and he feels things breaking, and then one of the legs snaps, and he collapses, and the thing can't move anymore, and he just kind of starts kicking the leg out, and he keeps on blasting, and then he starts to smell smoke inside of the cockpit, smoking up, and the light is getting way brighter, and he starts to feel his skin getting really, really hot, and he doesn't know what the deal is, and shooting and firing and blowing up, and then he goes unconscious. And he wakes up on the ground, and it looks like the walker vomited him out, and the walker's just kind of collapsed, almost looking dead like him, and he sees that there's a bunch of these dead Reds all over the place, and he realizes that he's actually plopped out into what looks like a crater almost, that he sort of blew into the ground, where everything is just a swath where a bunch of the dirt and stuff has just been thrown up into the air, and everything's dusty, and the trees around are all just kind of scathed and burnt out, and there's some fire over on the side, and he realizes that the house has been sort of blown out like what happens in a hurricane. The roof tiles have all been blown off, and pieces of the roof have been smashed off, but there's no noise. He doesn't see anything around, and he realizes that there's no way he can get up off the ground because his leg is just in severe pain, and he's just sort of lying there, And slowly he doesn't know if they made it or not. He has no idea how he would find out. And then suddenly sees a figure moving, and it's a kid who kind of comes down into sort of the crater he blew up. It's Toby. It's the kid with no eyes, and he immediately kind of takes off his mask, and he sees where he doesn't have any eyes. And Toby kind of looks at him and smiles, and it's both cute and not very comforting at the same time. And Toby says, "You know, if you put on the mask, you'll feel a lot better." And Max takes it, and he's about to put it on when he looks up and he sees the towers in the sky, and he notices that there's smoke and boiling out of a few of them, and they look like they've been attacked or something, or that something's wrong. And he says to Toby, did they make it out okay? And Toby says, just put on the mask. And he puts it on,